Slay the Spire is not a game I thought I'd be making a video about. It's far too complex, and I'm far too bad at it for me to be able to cover everything I'd want to in enough depth, let alone for that coverage to be succinct, or really intelligible at all. But every once in a while, a run comes along where everything goes pear-shaped in a twisted but mesmerizing way, like a car crash you just can't help but look at, until suddenly one of the cars grows a pair of wings, takes off, but flies too close to the sun. This is the story of one such run. It's a story of close calls, unlikely allies, and a hero who rises from the ashes of obscurity to make an impression I'll never forget. You could even call it an experience. That was terrible, I'm cutting that for sure. Now, before we get started, I should probably explain what Slay the Spire actually is. If you've never heard of it, Slay the Spire is a deck-building roguelike. Being the first of its kind, it actually sort of spawned a whole subgenre, and even after countless Spire-likes have come out, the original still outcompetes its newer brethren in my opinion, which should say a lot about the quality of its mechanics. Anyway, you pick one of 4 characters, in this case the Silent, and, well, attempt to slay the Spire. In carrying out this admittedly nebulous task, you will traverse a map full of enemies and events. In each combat encounter, you have a certain amount of energy you can play cards with. These cards include examples such as Attack for 6, Block for 5, or Retain, Enter Divinity, Die next turn, Exhaust. You know, simple stuff. Smack the enemy until their health reaches 0 and you'll get rewarded with a new card. Stronger enemies called elites drop relics, which provide unique buffs. There are 3 acts, each with a boss at the end. There's also a hidden 4th act, which you can access by attaining 3 keys. Now's probably a good time to mention that I don't usually play the Silent. I'm more of an Ironclad and Defect guy myself, just can't get enough of opening up paint to calculate optimal static discharge procs. I also play unreasonably fast, so strap yourselves in to witness some of the best gameplay you will ever see. I like to frame it as having character, not being robotic, and being a general rollercoaster of emotions. The run starts off pretty normally. I grab a free Envenom from the whale and proceed to pick up like 5 skills in a row. Luckily I don't get gremlin knobbed, or there wouldn't be much of a story here to tell. One lucky tingshaw on my first try of digging through scrap ooze later, and I've cobbled together what I guess could be described as a shiv deck. But the only thing this deck is really good at right now is slowly draining my health 1 point at a time. Things start to get interesting when I limp out of a Lagavulin fight and into a shop, in desperate need of damage to kill the boss with. As I glance over the shop's contents, I despair, naively thinking my damage woes would continue into my death. But that's when it hit me. See, the bottom right card in the shop is always a colorless rare, of which there are like 2 good ones to buy. So if I'm not literally seeing Apotheosis in that corner, my brain is automatically disregarding the thought of buying it. Usually. I don't know how I even noticed it in the moment. Whatever neuron fire to make me even consider purchasing it deserves a promotion ASAP. This card is Sadistic Nature, a card so bad that I wouldn't even pick it up for free. In fact, in my 400 hours of playing this game, I've never even considered adding it to my deck. It's just so expensive, the opportunity cost of buying it is so high, and its effect isn't even that strong to begin with. You hardly ever apply 1 debuff to an enemy per turn, let alone the multiple that would be required to make this card usable. But this is what makes Slay the Spire so enchanting, so mystical to me. No card in this game is useless. Okay, well except for Searing Blow. You just need to find the right circumstances for a card to really shine. And after 400 hours of playing this game, I have found that scenario. Allow me to elucidate that point. Back at the very start of the run, I got a card, Envenom, which makes all of my attacks apply 1 poison to the enemy. This is an alright effect, but nothing spectacular. Until you realize that poison counts as a debuff. You can probably see where this is going now, but if I get Envenom in play, Sadistic Nature suddenly goes from dealing 5 damage for each debuff applied to the target, to just straight up being 5 strength for 0 cost. To put this in perspective, strength is a flat plus X buff to your damage, and the Ironclad has a card called Inflame, which buffs strength by 2 and costs 1 energy. Hopefully you can see our new and improved Sadistic Nature is a tad better than that. Granted, Ironclad has a lot more ways to use that strength than Silent, but Silent has one thing that Ironclad does not: an abundance of knives. Shivs are 0 cost attacks, which are pretty weak, but thanks to them not only being free to play, but the cards that generate them usually generating multiple at once, they scale incredibly well with strength. Look, we have a budget sword boomerang, budget pummel, and don't worry, we'll be finding our budget heavy blade soon enough. Suffice it to say, this was a once-in-a-blue-moon confluence of just everything falling into place to make a normally terrible card look like the most busted thing that's ever graced a monitor. It absolutely shreds through the Act 1 boss's health bar, so there's no way this could go wrong. Right? Immediately as I walk into Act 2, the asterisk on sadistic nature gets a whole lot larger, as the floating ball of cotton and suffering exposes the only two weaknesses this setup has: block and artifact charges. Envenom only procs when hitting a non-blocking enemy, meaning we can never apply the poison debuff. As for artifact charges, they just block a debuff entirely, which means I actually have to fight gimmickless here. Nothing a firebomb can't handle, but the deck clearly isn't as invincible as I thought it was. Next, I encounter an event that tells me the whale downstairs may not be complying with the Spire's HR team, and might be making mindless killing machines, which perhaps includes me. But luckily, I can't read, and take the accursed tome with me for its broken effect. This is the Necronomicon, a niche little book that you probably haven't heard about. It will be quite useful in the construction of our budget heavy blade later. I managed to activate another completely broken combo when I pick up Calculated Gamble. This synergizes with Tingshaw by discarding my entire hand, causing the bells to ring like those wind chimes that one guy put up that keeps the entire neighborhood awake during windy nights. This deals immense psychic damage to the listeners, and in some cases may even cause them to die of pure annoyance. But at the end of the day, the card says gamble, so there's no way I'm not taking it. I encounter a bug in the mid-act chest room, which causes the contents of this chest to not spawn correctly. Normally there'd be a relic in here alongside the blue key, and you'd only be able to pick up one of them, which leads to some difficult decisions. But for some strange reason, that didn't happen here, as this was the easiest choice I have ever made. At the end of Act 2, I finally find that budget heavy blade I'd been searching for. This is Eviscerate, which I can reasonably make cost 2 through discarding, and it hits 3 times. This effectively means my strength value is applied triple for this card, causing it to hit for a pretty decent 54 damage when accounting for sadistic nature plus Envenom's poison. But I'm still being a bit untruthful here. Remember that obscure grimoire, the Necronomicon I think it was called? Well, it does this little thing known as doubling the first attack I play each turn that costs 2 or more. Basically, whenever I play Eviscerate, it gets played twice. And because of the way poison works, this more than doubles the damage I do, bringing the total up to 117. You might notice that this is more than most enemies' entire health bars. Combining this with Penniv, which doubles the damage of some attacks, and we're up to 144 damage. This allows me to, pardon the pun, eviscerate the boss of Act 2, Bronze Automaton, so fast that it becomes pointless to attack its minions. This requires such insane damage that not even my most powerful Ironclad runs can accomplish it, and that's the damage character. Going into Act 3, this deck is so powerful that the rest of the run is basically spent preparing for the Act 4 boss, because believe it or not, that's still a tangible threat. For all this deck excels at, it's still quite bad at blocking, and because of its thick nature, tends to be wildly inconsistent. I encounter a Sensory Stone event, which could allow me to find a second sadistic nature, but unfortunately I whiff and take Hand of Greed instead. I would explain this card, but it wouldn't matter, as literally seconds later I get the opportunity to transform it and potentially make another sadistic nature. Of course I whiff a second time, but at least this blunder can't be put up to greed, as I clearly transformed it away. I get a nice gauge of how strong I am when I fight the Transient, who's basically just a punching bag for me now. I manage to get it down to half health before it fades away. Speaking of punching bags, I have to beat the Super Elite to obtain the green key, but it ends up being a giant head with a max HP buff, which furthers my agenda of cathartically stabbing monsters with my infinite blades. The red key comes to me courtesy of recalling at my next bonfire, so I'm now officially qualified to go beat up Act 4. Before we make it there though, there's one last completely blessed shop left to plunder. Not only does it contain a shuriken, which combos perfectly with the shivs I'm spamming every turn, but it also has beans! Staying with the theme of this run, these innocuous beans allow me to cancel my debuffs, including the debuff attached to Flex Potion, which can allow me to gain 5 strength on the final boss, no asterisks included. Time Eater is the Act 3 boss who usually poses a problem for roll your face on the keyboard until the enemy dies decks such as this, as he limits you to only playing max 12 cards per turn. But I'm so strong at this point that I roll him over before he can even enter phase 2. Act 4 is a little different than the other acts. It's only 4 floors long, and it's always a bonfire, shop, elite, and then the boss. I spend the bonfire and shop honing my powers to become a little spikier than before. I then step into the elite. The Spire Shield and Spire Spear will destroy you if you aren't prepared and have enough damage to kill one of them quickly, thanks to their unique Surrounded debuff, which causes you to take 1.5 times damage to the one stabbing you in the back. Luckily, I don't even have to interact with this mechanic, as the shield goes down on turn 1. This leaves the spear on its own, which, according to my account of things, sprouted legs and ran away in terror. I definitely didn't brutally murder it like its friend. This leaves only the heart of the spire standing, the final boss, and despite what you may be thinking, I still have a very real chance to lose here. The heart does not mess around, it's Beat of Death dealing damage every time I play a card. I drink all of my relevant potions, including using my tin of beans to negate Flex Potion's strength reduction. The heart's attacks are incredibly powerful if not countered correctly. This 1x15 is actually 3x15 through the weakness I've applied, and this quickly grows to absurd numbers, effectively creating a point in the fight where the heart is no longer blockable. But this deck was not going to sputter out before putting up a fight, and was a fight it was. I was giving the heart a lot of credit before, but really it stands very little chance against a deck as RNG blessed as this. By the time I get all of my synergies up and running, it's basically dead already. And what better way to finish it off than with the very thing that saved the run in the first place.